I stood before the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom, taking a deep breath to steady myself. Today was the day I closed a chapter of my life, a marriage that had become a burden. I wasn't afraid, but I couldn't say I was completely calm either. The truth was, I had been preparing for this day for a long time. The hallway leading into the courtroom was packed. Lawyers, court staff, witnesses, and even gossip-hungry reporters looking for a sensational story. I could feel their eyes glance over me, curious but not truly interested. To them, I was just one of hundreds of women coming here to end a broken marriage. But I knew today wouldn't be like any other divorce hearing. I adjusted my light coat, covering the faded dress underneath. A dress that had stayed with me for years, a symbol of the life of quiet endurance I once lived. I stepped inside the courtroom and my eyes quickly found my ex-husband. Well, almost ex, Jason Carter. He sat comfortably next to his mother, Margaret Carter, a woman who had never hidden her contempt for me. Not far from them, Cassandra, the woman who had come between us, smirked when our eyes met. "Oh wow, Michelle, just look at you," Cassandra curled her lips, her voice laced with fake pity. "No wonder Jason chose me." I said nothing, refusing to fall into their game. But my former mother-in-law wasn't about to let it go. She chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Exactly. My son could never live with a woman who spends all day buried in silly little drawings." Jason crossed his arms, gave a mocking smile, then delivered a line that silenced the entire room for a few seconds. "She's like a draft horse, strong, obedient, but not exactly appealing." Quiet laughter rippled through a few people nearby. I could feel the mocking glances from strangers, and that stung more than the insults. Jason didn't just belittle me, he truly believed I'd keep enduring, like the submissive wife he once controlled. But he didn't know that the Michelle Carter standing here today was no longer that woman. I gripped both sides of my worn dress, eyes locked on Jason. Calmly I unfastened each button of my coat, then let it drop onto the seat beside me. The room fell into an unusual silence. I reached for the faded dress, pulled it away, and revealed a stunning, vibrant red gown underneath. One I had secretly bought with money I saved from selling my paintings. It wasn't just a dress. It was a declaration. The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted instantly. I could feel the shock ripple through those around me. A few couldn't help but whisper. My ex-mother-in-law froze, Cassandra turned pale, and Jason, the one who mocked me seconds earlier, was suddenly speechless. I stepped forward, stood tall, and looked Jason in the eye. "I'm not a draft horse, Jason," I said, my voice steady and firm. "I'm an artist, and I decide my own path." The court clerk spoke up, breaking the tension. "Michelle Carter, are you ready to proceed with the divorce hearing?" I took a deep breath, lifted my chin just a bit higher. "Yes," I answered, eyes still fixed on Jason. "I'm ready." I left the courtroom with steady steps, filled with a deep sense of relief. The sneers, the disdainful looks from Jason and his family, they didn't matter anymore. Today, I was no longer the old Michelle, the woman who endured and sacrificed to keep a hollow marriage alive. I had spent too many years living in Jason's shadow, forgetting who I really was. As the cold wind brushed past me, I tugged my coat lightly, remembering the years before I met him. Those tough, lonely days I had pushed through on my own. I was born into a poor working-class family in a small town in Ohio. My mother Linda was a janitor at a local high school, and my father was an electrician. Life was never easy, but at least when my father was alive, we had some peace. He was the only one who believed in my talent for painting. On evenings when my mom was still cleaning hallways at school, he would sit beside me, watching as I drew on scraps of paper he brought home from work. "Michelle, you've got talent," he often said, pride glowing in his eyes. "You just need to believe in yourself." But then tragedy struck. My father died in a work accident when I was 12. One day he climbed a power pole to check the system and had a fatal fall. The death notice came faster than we could prepare. My mom fell apart. Once a strong woman, she became quiet, always tired from unpaid bills. Her janitor's wages weren't enough for the two of us, so I learned to be independent earlier than most kids. By high school I was working part-time at a local diner, first wiping tables then washing dishes. On cold nights, when the dishwater numbed my hands, I often wondered if I'd ever escape that life. I still painted, but the peaceful nights with my dad were gone, and no one was there to encourage my dream. My mother, though she loved me, didn't believe art could lead to a better life. "Michelle, be realistic," she said when I talked about applying to art school. "We don't have money for those kinds of fantasies." So I set my dream aside. I kept working, saving every penny, hoping one day I could stand on my own. That was when I met Jason. Jason Carter walked into the diner where I worked one autumn evening with his group of friends. At the time, I had just picked up a shift for a sick waitress and my hands were still wet from dishwashing. He smiled at me from the very first moment, the kind of confident smile that came from a man who knew exactly how charming he was. He called me over to the table more times than necessary, offering compliments I was too naive then to realize were insincere. For the first time in my life, I felt noticed. A poor girl from Ohio with hands always greasy from work had caught the attention of a man like him. Jason pursued me passionately, taking me on walks through glamorous neighborhoods I had only dreamed about, bringing me to lavish parties I had never imagined attending. I loved him. I believed his love was real. When Jason proposed, I thought I had found my way out of poverty. I quit my job at the diner, devoting all my time to caring for him, believing that's what a good wife should do. But I didn't realize that the moment I gave up my own identity to fit into his world, I had started losing myself. After we got married, Jason changed quickly. The romantic dates faded away, replaced by his endless meetings and the many times I was left alone in our big house. I began to feel like nothing more than a decorative piece in the perfect life he wanted others to see. My mother-in-law Margaret never saw me as part of the family. She always found subtle ways to remind me I was an outsider, someone unworthy of the Carter name. I tried to please her, tried to become the daughter-in-law she wanted. But then I discovered Jason was having an affair. And the woman he chose was none other than Cassandra, a wealthy former model. When I confronted him, he just gave a dry laugh. "You really think I need someone like you? Someone who doesn't know how to behave at parties, someone who's always lost in useless paintings?" I wanted to believe he would change, but eventually I realized that if I kept holding on, I would be the only one who lost. So I decided to leave. I walked away from the lavish house and returned to my small apartment, where I could live as myself again. And today, standing in court, I officially put an end to that chapter. The drizzle coated the streets in a cold gray hue, but my heart was filled with a sense of freedom I had never felt before. After the divorce hearing, I was no longer tied to Jason. There were still challenges ahead, but I knew I had made the right choice. Living independently wasn't easy. I didn't have much in savings, just a small month-to-month apartment, a few simple outfits, and the art supplies I had kept for years. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that I could be myself, not live in anyone's shadow. I spent the week focused on painting, searching for opportunities to land art commissions. Then luck came. I received an email from a man named Nathaniel Wright, a wealthy businessman looking for an artist to paint a portrait of his son. I had never taken on a high-end portrait commission like this before, but I knew it was a chance I couldn't pass up. If I did well, I could begin to build my name in the art world. I picked up the phone, nervously dialing the number in the email. "Hello, Michelle, this is Nathaniel Wright," a warm, deep voice came through the line. "I've looked over your work and I believe you'd be a great fit to paint a portrait of my son, Lucas." "I'm honored by the opportunity, Mr. Wright," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Could you tell me more about the painting?" "Lucas is 8 years old. I'd like an oil painting in a classic style. I want to hang it in my office." I jotted down all the important details and Nathaniel provided the address where I could meet Lucas and begin sketching. The next morning, I stood before a grand estate on the outskirts of New York. The large iron gates opened to reveal a stone path leading to an elegant mansion with tall, pristine white columns. I couldn't help but be amazed. This wasn't just a home, it looked like a modern-day castle. I climbed the steps, clutching my art bag, and rang the doorbell. A middle-aged woman in a black velvet dress opened the door, her sharp gaze scanning me from head to toe. "Are you Michelle?" "Yes, I'm here to see Mr. Wright." She nodded and turned inside. I followed, feeling a bit uneasy surrounded by the home's opulence. The interior was adorned with expensive artwork and crystal chandeliers sparkling off the high ceilings. In the center of the living room, a blond boy around 8 sat in an armchair, his eyes fixed on a toy car in his hands. Beside him stood a tall man in a tailored suit. Nathaniel Wright. "Michelle, welcome," Nathaniel greeted me warmly, shaking my hand. "This is Lucas, my son." Lucas looked up at me, his blue eyes filled with curiosity. "Hi, Lucas," I said gently. "Do you like to draw?" He gave a small nod but didn't speak. Nathaniel chuckled. "He's a bit shy around new people, but soon enough he'll be talking more than I do." I smiled, then opened my bag and pulled out my sketchbook and pencil. "We'll start with a rough sketch first. Do you want to include a toy in the portrait?" Lucas thought for a moment, then held up his toy car. "I want this in the painting." I nodded and began to sketch the first lines. But just as I was focusing on my work, footsteps echoed from the staircase behind me. I looked up and saw Serena Wright, Nathaniel's second wife. She descended the stairs in a cream silk dress, her softly curled blonde hair styled to perfection. But what caught my attention most was her expression, a look that was anything but welcoming. Serena stopped in front of me, arms crossed. "I wasn't aware Nathaniel had hired an artist." "I just finalized it yesterday," Nathaniel replied calmly. "Michelle is very talented. I believe she'll do a great job." Serena looked me up and down, her eyes assessing. "Interesting," she said slowly. "You don't look like the artists I've met before." I wasn't sure what she meant by that, but I kept my composure. "I hope to create a painting your family will truly love." Serena gave a thin smile, but I could feel the chill behind it. "Very well," she said, then turned and walked away. But before leaving, I noticed her glance at Nathaniel with a look I couldn't quite read. Something unspoken between them? The atmosphere grew strangely tense. I returned to my sketch, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just stepped into a house full of secrets. And I wasn't sure I really wanted to know what those secrets were. After a few sessions at the Wright residence, I gradually became used to the unique atmosphere of the place. Lucas was a sweet boy, a little shy but very bright. Nathaniel was always busy with work, but whenever he had free time he made a point to play with his son. Serena, on the other hand, remained a mystery. She never openly confronted me, but there was always something off in the way she observed everything. One afternoon, as I was finalizing the sketch for Lucas, a deep, raspy voice spoke from behind me. "So, you're the new artist." I startled and turned around. An older man stood there, leaning on a cane, his eyes sharp though his face showed the marks of time. He wore a suit, slightly wrinkled but still carrying the air of someone who once held great stature. Though I had never met him before, something about him felt strangely familiar. "I'm Michelle," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm here to paint a portrait of Lucas." The man nodded slowly, then stepped closer. "I'm Arthur Wright, in case you didn't know. I'm Nathaniel's father." My eyes widened. He was Nathaniel's father? He didn't look like the wealthy businessman I had imagined. Arthur had a somber, mysterious presence. He didn't look at me, but instead gazed at the unfinished painting. "Did you know that painting can be a wonderful way to remember?" he said softly, almost as if speaking to himself. "Even when memories fade, the image stays." I didn't understand what he meant right away, but something in his voice made me pause. Before I could respond, Nathaniel entered, his expression a bit uneasy when he saw his father there. "Dad," he said gently, "do you want to go rest in the study? You've walked quite a bit today." Arthur let out a light scoff but said nothing. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away, his steps slow but thoughtful. Once he disappeared behind the door, Nathaniel sighed. "He used to be a well-known lawyer," Nathaniel said as if explaining, "but in the last few years his memory hasn't been the same." I couldn't help but recall the look in Arthur's eyes as he stared at the painting. A look filled with a past he couldn't quite hold on to. But there was something else that left me wondering. If his memory was really failing, then why did his words carry such meaning? The next day, as I was preparing my art supplies, Arthur appeared again, this time in the estate's library. He looked at me, then gestured for me to sit down. "I know you think I'm just a forgetful old man," he said, his tone calm but firm, "but I remember the important things, and I know something's going on in this house that my son has no idea about." I froze. "What do you mean?" Arthur glanced around, as if afraid someone might be listening, then lowered his voice. "Serena, she's not who she pretends to be. I've seen things I shouldn't have." I didn't know whether to believe him, but there was something in his serious tone I couldn't ignore. "I used to be a lawyer," he continued. "Handled a lot of cases involving financial fraud, shady contracts, and schemes hiding behind polished appearances. Serena? She's clever, but she can't fool me. I frowned. Do you have any proof? Arthur pressed his lips together, as if weighing something. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small sheet of paper, handing it to me. It was a list of banking transactions I didn't fully understand, but what shocked me was the size of the amounts. She's transferring money to an anonymous account, Arthur said. I don't know what she's doing, but I know it's not clean. I looked at him skeptical. Why are you telling me? Why not tell Nathaniel? Arthur gave a sad smile. Because he doesn't believe me anymore. He thinks I'm just an old man rambling nonsense. I bit my lip. If what Arthur said was true, it could threaten the entire Wright family. But if it was just the imagination of someone with memory issues, I might be stirring up trouble for no reason. Can you do something for me? Arthur asked suddenly. I looked up, heart pounding. What is it? Can you place a camera in Serena's office? I need proof. I froze. You want me to spy on her? Arthur nodded slowly. I know it doesn't sound right. But if I'm wrong, we can erase everything. But if I'm right... He paused, his eyes hardening. Nathaniel and Lucas could be in danger. I hesitated. This wasn't something I wanted to get involved in. I was just an artist, here to paint a portrait, not to dig into someone's family secrets. But deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore what he'd said. I sighed. I'll think about it. Arthur nodded as if he had expected that answer. Thank you, Michelle. I left the library with a storm of thoughts swirling in my head. Part of me wanted to ignore it all and just focus on my work, but another part of me couldn't shake the feeling that Arthur wasn't wrong. And I couldn't deny that. I wanted to know the truth too. I held tightly onto the small box containing the hidden camera, my mind racing. Arthur had asked me to place a surveillance device in Serena Wright's office, Nathaniel Wright's second wife. I knew this was way beyond the scope of what a portrait artist should be doing. I had come to this house simply to paint Lucas, not to investigate a potential conspiracy. But Arthur's words lingered in my mind. His trembling yet firm voice as he spoke about mysterious transfers and the danger he feared for Nathaniel and Luke. What if he was right? What if Serena really was up to something? I couldn't shake that thought. That evening, after finishing a session with Lucas, I used the excuse of needing more brushes from my car to stay at the Wright house a little longer. I quietly observed the hallway as I made my way to the second floor. Serena's office was at the end of the hallway, its heavy wooden door tightly shut. I looked around one more time, making sure no one was nearby, then quickly opened the door and slipped inside. Light from the hallway spilled into the spacious room. On the desk, papers were neatly stacked, and a laptop sat open but with the screen off. The room exuded luxury, but there was an inexplicable coldness to it. I walked toward the bookshelf across from the desk, where a tall vase was placed. It was the perfect spot. I quickly installed the small camera behind the vase, adjusting the angle to capture the full room. My hands trembled slightly as I finished the setup. Before leaving, I glanced around the room, searching for anything unusual. A black envelope lying casually on the desk caught my attention. I wasn't one to snoop, but something told me I should check it. I gently opened the envelope. Inside was a set of documents labeled in bold. Share transfer agreement for authorized party, only. I skimmed through, trying to grasp the content. The terms were written in complex legal language, but what shocked me was the name on the contract. Nathaniel Wright, transferor. Transferees GC Holdings. Someone was trying to force Nathaniel to give up control of his company, but who was GC Holdings? I snapped photos of the important pages, carefully placed everything back as it was, and quickly left Serena's office. The next morning I sat in my small apartment, the screen of my phone displaying footage from the camera. At first there was nothing unusual, just an empty room. But about an hour later, the door opened, and Serena walked in. I watched her on the screen. She sat at the desk, opened the laptop, and typed a series of numbers on the keyboard. I turned up the volume. A man's voice came through her phone speaker. Is everything going smoothly? Serena folded her arms, her tone confident. Nathaniel suspects nothing. I've arranged for him to sign the documents this week. My heart pounded. Good, the man said. GC Holdings will take over as soon as everything's finalized. After that, we'll handle the rest. A chill ran down my spine. The rest. What did that mean? Serena paused for a few seconds, then spoke slowly. What about Arthur? I think he's starting to suspect something. That old man isn't lucid anymore. Don't worry. If necessary, we can make him disappear. Naturally. My entire body froze. They were talking about Arthur. What could they possibly mean by make him disappear? I bit my lip, trying to stay calm. This was far beyond anything I had imagined. This wasn't just financial fraud. It could be dangerous, even deadly for Arthur. I knew what I had to do. That afternoon, I returned to the Wright estate. Nathaniel was working in the living room when I entered. He looked up, smiling. Michelle? Something wrong? I sat down across from him, looking him straight in the eyes. Nathaniel, I need to talk to you. About Serena. He frowned, confused. Serena? What about her? I carefully pulled out my phone, opened the video clip, and handed it to him. Nathaniel watched in silence, his expression darkening as Serena's voice filled the quiet room. When the recording ended, he set the phone down, his hands clenched into fists. Have you told anyone else about this? I shook my head. No, but I think we need to protect Arthur immediately. Nathaniel took a deep breath, clearly trying to suppress his rising anger. I'll take care of it. Can you stay here tonight? I was surprised. Why? He looked at me, his eyes more serious than ever. Because I don't know how Serena will react once she finds out her secret's been exposed. A shiver ran down my spine. I had stepped into something far more dangerous than I had expected. But I also knew that no matter how scared I was, there was no turning back now. The living room fell into tense silence after Nathaniel watched the footage. I could see his hands clenched tightly, his eyes dark with disbelief. He didn't speak right away, just sat still, breathing deeply as if trying to contain the fury rising inside him. I waited for him to say something, but instead Nathaniel stood abruptly and walked to the liquor cabinet in the corner. He poured himself a glass of cold water, downed it in one go, then turned to face me. Michelle, do you realize what you've just done? His voice was low, tinged with both shock and anger. I clenched my hands in my lap, trying to stay composed. I know I've stepped into something complicated. But if I didn't, who would protect Arthur? Who would protect Lucas? The mention of Lucas brought a flicker of determination to Nathaniel's eyes. He stared at me for another moment, then pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Aiden, come to my house right now, he said sharply, without hesitation. I need you. I didn't know who Aiden was, but one thing was certain, Nathaniel wasn't going to let this go quietly. About an hour later, the estate's front door opened and a tall man walked in. He wore a sleek black suit, but there was something about him. The way he cautiously surveyed the surroundings, the way he carried himself with quiet authority, that told me he wasn't just a businessman. Aiden nodded at Nathaniel, then looked at me. You're Michelle? His voice wasn't gruff as I expected, but polite. Still sharp, like someone used to dealing with dangerous situations. Yes, I replied, feeling a bit of pressure. Nathaniel handed him the phone and played the recording I had captured. None of us spoke while it played. When it ended, Aiden lowered the phone and thought silently for a moment. I had my suspicions about Serena, he said slowly, but I didn't think she'd go this far. He turned to Nathaniel. What do you want to do? Nathaniel's fists tightened, his eyes burning with anger. I'm confronting her, tonight. Aiden nodded. I'll stay close, just in case she reacts unpredictably. We found Serena in her office, sitting in front of her laptop typing something on the keyboard. When Nathaniel opened the door, she looked up, her icy blue eyes immediately sensing something was off. What are you doing here? Serena asked, her voice calm but slightly guarded. Nathaniel walked straight to her desk, placed his phone in front of her, and hit play on the recording. At first Serena showed no emotion, but as her own voice and that of the mysterious man echoed clearly through the room, her face paled, and her hand trembled slightly on the keyboard. You were spying on me? Her voice grew quieter, but I noticed something. It wasn't the voice of someone caught red-handed. It was the voice of someone trying to regain control. Nathaniel gave a cold smile. No, Serena, you exposed yourself. Serena shot up from her chair, her eyes flashing with fury. You really think you can trust some cheap artist like her? She snapped, staring directly at me with a sneer. Can't you see she's just using this to get close to you, Nathaniel? I wasn't surprised she tried to deflect. People like Serena always knew how to wriggle their way out. Nathaniel gritted his teeth. I trusted you. I gave you my family. And you betrayed me like this? Serena took a deep breath and then, suddenly, let out a bitter laugh. Trust me? She stepped forward, her gaze filled with hatred. Nathaniel, did you really think I loved you? I stayed with you because I needed you, because I wanted what you had. She tilted her head, smirking. But now you're worthless to me. A chill ran down my spine as I saw her eyes dart quickly, calculating something. Then, before anyone could react, Serena reached for the letter opener on the desk. I gasped, but she was faster. She lunged toward Arthur, eyes filled with determination. Aiden moved quicker than I expected. He launched forward, grabbing Serena's wrist just before the blade reached Arthur. A fierce grunt echoed, and in a flash, Aiden slammed Serena to the ground, disarming her. Nathaniel stood frozen, his face pale. Arthur, though frail with age, showed no fear in his eyes. Serena struggled, but Aiden held her firmly, his face expressionless. It's over, Serena. She looked up, panting, and let out a bitter laugh. You don't know anything. I didn't do this for money. Nathaniel frowned. Then why? Serena looked at Arthur, her eyes blazing with vengeance. For my father, she said in a low, seething voice. Arthur, right. He destroyed my father's life. He refused to defend him, let him rot in prison for 20 years. Now it's time to pay him back. The room fell into silence. I looked at Arthur, his face was unreadable, but his eyes held a flicker of pain from the past. Nathaniel stared at Serena like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. You planned all this just to get revenge on me because of that. Serena didn't respond. She just laughed, bitter and broken. Aiden called the police, and within minutes they arrived, handcuffed Serena, and took her away. I exhaled deeply, relieved, though one question still lingered in my mind. If Serena was just a pawn in this game, then who was really behind it all? The courtroom was packed that morning, the air heavier than ever. I stepped inside, took a deep breath, and braced myself. This was the final day I would face Jason Carter, the man who had once been my husband, who had treated me like a workhorse and betrayed me without remorse. But today I was no longer the weak Michelle of the past. I was here to end everything, to claim justice for myself. Inside the courtroom, Jason sat at the opposite table, wearing his usual smug expression. Though he tried to appear calm, his eyes betrayed a hint of tension. Beside him was his lawyer, a confident-looking man with a thick folder in hand. I glanced to my side. Arthur Wright sat one seat away from me, his presence steady and composed like the seasoned attorney he was. After everything, he had chosen to stand with me. The judge entered, banging the gavel. We are continuing the divorce proceedings between Michelle Carter and Jason Carter. Jason's lawyer stood, speaking in a composed but arrogant tone. Your Honor, my client fully agrees to the divorce. However, he believes the plaintiff's request for asset division is unreasonable. Michelle Carter made no significant contribution to the shared assets and therefore has no claim to any portion of the estate. I smirked. So that's why he was hanging on until the end, money. Arthur rose, eyes sharp as a hawk. Your Honor, I request permission to present evidence that Jason Carter misused shared assets for unauthorized personal transactions. The courtroom stirred. I looked at Jason. His face went rigid, his hand unconsciously clenched. He hadn't expected I would come prepared. Arthur stepped forward, placing a folder before the judge. We have proof that Jason Carter used joint investment funds for secret financial dealings. He withdrew money from the shared account and funneled it into another under the name of a shell company. Jason shot up. This is slander. The judge raised a hand, motioning him to be silent. I will review the evidence. Arthur continued. In addition, we have documentation showing Jason Carter used joint funds to support his mistress, purchasing property, vehicles, and expensive gifts. A large screen lit up, displaying the transactions we had gathered. Everything was clear. Every dollar, every signature, every trace of deceit. Jason's face turned pale. The hearing lasted nearly 2 hours. As the judge prepared to deliver the verdict, my heart pounded in my chest. After reviewing all evidence, the judge said, eyes fixed on Jason, the court rejects the defendant's objection to asset division. Furthermore, due to evidence of misuse of shared assets for personal gain, the defendant is ordered to reimburse the plaintiff an amount equal to the misused funds. The room was so silent I could hear Jason grinding his teeth. The judge continued, "The marriage between Michelle Carter and Jason Carter is officially dissolved as of today." I exhaled deeply. I had won. I had reclaimed justice for myself. As I stepped out of the courthouse, the midday sun lit up the road ahead. I felt lighter than ever before. Arthur walked up beside me, speaking slowly. "You did very well, Michelle." I smiled, deeply grateful to him. "Thank you, Arthur. I don't know if I could have done it without you." He nodded, then turned to Nathaniel, who had remained silent throughout the entire hearing but had been by my side the whole time. "Nathaniel, what do you plan to do with the company?" Nathaniel stared into the distance. "I'm going to fix the damage Serena caused." He turned to me, his eyes sincere. "And Michelle, if you want, I can help you build your art career. You deserve that." My heart felt warmer than ever. I had fought to reclaim justice, and now I could finally start over. I was no longer the woman belittled by her husband, mocked by her mother-in-law, or trapped in toxic relationships. I was Michelle Carter, an artist, a free woman, and someone who wasn't afraid of anything anymore. I held my head high and stepped onto my new path. That evening, as I walked out of the courthouse, a cool breeze brushed against my skin, carrying with it the relief of someone finally freed from the chains of the past. I was officially no longer Jason Carter's wife. No more lies. No more years of silent endurance. Nathaniel was waiting just outside the courthouse gates. He didn't say anything at first, simply handed me a cup of hot coffee, as if he instinctively knew I needed a little warmth amidst all the swirling emotions. "How does freedom feel?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. I smiled, taking a sip, letting the warmth spread through me. "Relieving, but also strange." He nodded. "I think you'll get used to it pretty quickly." We stood there for a while, watching the rush of traffic on the street. I wasn't in a hurry to leave. This was a moment I wanted to hold on to. A moment where I didn't have to worry about tomorrow. Finally, Nathaniel spoke, breaking the comfortable silence between us. "Michelle, if you'd like, I can help you build your own gallery. A place where you can pursue your art freely without having to worry about finances." I turned to look at him. His eyes weren't just kind, they held something deeper. "I don't want to work because of anyone's pity," I said softly. "I know!" Nathaniel smiled, shaking his head. "But this isn't pity. I believe in your talent, Michelle, and more than that." He stepped a little closer, his voice lowering. "I believe in you." I paused, feeling something unfamiliar, something like safety, something I hadn't felt in a long time. In the months that followed, my life began to change. I was no longer a woman living in someone else's shadow. I dedicated my time to growth, taking on more art commissions, and gradually building a name for myself in the art world. And Nathaniel was always there. He didn't push me. He didn't try to control me the way Jason once did. He simply stood by my side, supporting every choice I made. We spent more time together, sometimes walking through the park, sometimes just having long conversations about life, about small things that somehow felt so meaningful. One day, as I was finishing the last touches on Lucas's portrait, Nathaniel walked into my studio, holding a small box in his hand. "There's something I want to ask you," he said. I looked up, my heart skipping a beat when I saw the seriousness in his eyes. He stepped closer, then unexpectedly dropped to one knee. I drew in a sharp breath, barely able to believe what was happening. "Michelle," Nathaniel said, his voice warm and sincere, "you walked into my life unexpectedly. You not only helped me see the truth, you helped me realize I never want to lose you." My throat tightened. "I know you've been through a lot, but I don't want you to keep walking this path alone. I want to be by your side. I want us to build the kind of future we both deserve." He opened the little box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring, glinting under the studio lights. "Michelle Carter, will you marry me?" The room was so quiet I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat. I had once thought I'd never believe in love again. But Nathaniel, he had been patient, letting me see that love wasn't about control, it was about partnership. I looked into his eyes, then slowly nodded, tears slipping down my cheeks. "Yes," I whispered. Nathaniel laughed softly, a sound I knew I'd remember for the rest of my life. He stood, gently slipped the ring onto my finger, then wrapped me in his arms. For the first time in so many years, I felt truly happy. That day we walked out of the studio, hand in hand. The breeze danced along the busy street, but I didn't feel lost anymore. I had weathered the storm, I had endured betrayal, I had fought to rediscover myself. And now I was walking a new path, a path I didn't have to walk alone. Life isn't always fair, but we always have the power to choose how we face it. Michelle was once a woman trapped in a painful marriage, but she didn't let her past define her. She stood up, claimed her justice, found herself again, and finally found the happiness she deserved. Michelle's story isn't just about betrayal and consequences. It's about courage, resilience, and the belief in a brighter future. Something anyone can reach if they dare to step out of the shadows. What do you think of Michelle's journey? Did she make the right choice in leaving her past behind to find herself again? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about life, family, and inner strength.